In this series, we're growing a Robinhood account from $0 all the way to 1 million, and I'm showing you every step of the way how I get there with complete transparency. That's all my entries and exits. I post them all live in the Discord. The link is in the description. But you can see that we got over 10K on Friday at some point on May 30th, but we closed at $9,520. It was about a 15% gain in the portfolio, and these are all our current open positions. But really what I want to talk about is two stocks that I think are going to carry this portfolio over the next month. And the first one is Unity Software. Unity Software, it's a platform for gamer developers, and they've recently released a new platform called Vector, which is like an ad tech platform that can compete with AppLovin. So it's solid from a fundamental perspective, but you can see here in the account, we are only playing options on this. We have some call debit spreads, some naked calls at various different expirations and strikes. You can see that our position currently is at $2,520. We're up 166%. At one point, we were up over 200%, but I do think there's more upside here. Now, I do cover all of this in the Discord. It's completely free to join, so you can see the link below. And I've been posting since earlier than May 22nd. This was right before the first run, why I think Roaring Kitty is the mystery buyer behind Unity Software. And it's pretty obvious at this point. It's been covered widely on the internet with the Unity ring on the Rick James skit, then the U falling off the pizza shop store sign. This is person of the year is you. Then he also gave a gift box in the shape of the Unity logo. So it's pretty obvious that he's in Unity Software. There's also a lot of call volume in large blocks. On Friday, there was quite a bit of premium. In the morning, it was a 10K block for 5.25 million for the 30 calls for January, and then another 10K block at 5.4 million. And this is very similar to how GameStop developed last year. And then ultimately he tweeted the gamer sitting up in the chair, and then the stock exploded to the upside. And I'll kind of give you a bit of a history on GameStop last year when we played it, but really I think a very similar setup is happening here in Unity. So let's just hop right into the charts, and I can give you guys an idea of first where I think the overall market is headed. Then we'll go into Apple, and then we'll save the best for last with Unity Software. So obviously we've had a bit of a chop. We had a really big bounce from the tariffs, the 90-day pause, and then the China-US trade deal, which was like this gap here. Now China is kind of dragging their feet on different terms and things like that. And, we've kind of been chopping right on this trend line that you see here, this green trend line. And that's really like a inflection point. If we can hold above this and we're going to push higher, we were able to close above it once, but we're not able to hold that level as there was like EU tariffs that happened. Then there was a pause on that. So then we had another move higher from that. We had a bit of an island bottom that formed, but you can see it's in this range right now, right? So you have this bull gap support down here, and then you have a bit of a bear gap above near 594 to 595. And I do think at some point we are going to fill that to the upside because there are trade deals that need to come through. They've been talking about this for weeks. Besant over the weekend said that President Trump will meet with China's Xi, and they'll come to some sort of negotiation or timeline to actually manage and negotiate on a trade deal. Obviously, they already walked back a lot of the tariffs. But then also you have Europe, India, Vietnam, like all these other countries that we're still waiting to see those trade deals come through. But nevertheless, SPY was forming a bull flag. So we had like a gap up, and then we filled this gap, and we've been trading in this range. We had another gap down. We filled that gap. So bulls are relatively strong still, even with a couple of these gap downs earlier in the week. We came back down to the lower end of this flag. So you can see there's 1, 2, and now 3 reactions. And this is a really easy buy the dip moment at this 584 support zone. You also had this island bottom gap as well. And then we pushed to the upside and we actually broke above that on Friday. So there's a really strong end of day move. That was a bit of like an end of month rebalancing that happens between equities and bonds. But nonetheless, yields are starting to drop, right? So bonds are not as much of an issue anymore when yields were going higher, which really raises the cost of capital and kind of cuts the heads off of equities, right? If you're thinking from like a purely financial perspective with the weighted average cost of capital going higher. But nonetheless, really it's just if yields are going too high, that's bad for stocks. And that means treasuries are selling, and then eventually that spills over into the equity markets. But because yields are coming down, we had a nice, at least providing some room for the stock market to see more upside. Everything moves together, it's all connected, and it just takes time to really understand a lot of these, more of these like macroeconomic data points. But nonetheless, you can always just look at the charts and see that this was a bullish consolidation pattern. We finally broke out to the upside. We are now holding over this 589.46 support zone. And then, of course, we still have that trend line that we've been kind of fluctuating on at this point. So we want to reclaim 591. We want to fill this gap if we're bullish and then start pushing towards this 621 level. And then, of course, if somehow we can break this flag down, we're going to come back down here to test this gap. If we fill that, then chances are we're going to see this 575 level again. But nonetheless, I'm bullish on the overall stock market for the next couple weeks. You got Tesla introducing robo-taxis. Apple's got an event. NVIDIA just did well on earnings, even though it gapped up and then crapped for the whole day. But nonetheless, there are going to be trade deals. There's going to be positive things. A lot of the tariff stuff is kind of overplayed at this point. Everyone's talking about the taco trade that Trump always chickens out. And whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. I think the market's going to push a bit. VIX can still drop to this 17 range and even a bit lower towards 15. That's when I'd start be thinking about, okay, maybe the market's running a little hot. It's going to probably sell. But that probably all happens around June option expiration, which is still about 20 days from now. So I think there's like a few weeks here that we could have a strong push in the market. We could even be bullish into July. It just really depends what happens around quad witching, which is June expiration on the 20th. So we'll see what happens there with like the futures roll and everything. But let's take a look at Apple. Apple finally is starting to have a little run here. It's showing some life here at the end of the day. This was a really strong move. It's been weak relative to the other Mag 7 stocks, and that's because Trump is threatening 25% tariffs on all iPhones not made in the US. And so it wasn't able to get above this 213.64 level, which has been an area where it's just struggled 3 times now. It's rejected from this 213 level. As you can see, 1, 2, and 3. And we are still holding this 196 zone. That has been a pretty key support level. But I'd really like this to push over 206, try to get to that 213 range. And then this bear gap is still staring at us, right? We want to fill into this gap. If we can get in here around 214, then we're going to probably push to this 220 level. And most likely we'll try to fill this complete gap. Those would be my targets. So 213 to 219 to 225 over the next 1 to 2 months. And of course, they have the developers conference on June 9th. Hopefully that goes well. Talks a lot about what they're doing with iOS and chips, and maybe they'll even release some news about what they plan for next year with foldable phones, robotics, wearables, all of those different things. So hopefully that goes well. But really, I'm hoping for a really bullish candle on Apple just because it's lagging behind all the others. Now, last but not least, let's just take another look at Unity. This is one of the bullish stocks that I'm playing right now in both my challenge portfolio and my main portfolio. Let's see if we can make multiple 6 figures on this one. But really what we're looking at is you can see that price likes to move pretty well between these 2 ranges, and it moves pretty quickly, right? So you've had like this strong move back in November, you had a strong move back in February, And even somewhat here from April to the end of April, it had a nice move out of there. It consolidated in this range, and now it's starting to break out to the upside. And there are some levels to watch. Like, you could take a look at how this uptrend, or really this downtrend from like the long-term downtrend, because it's been trading in this lower range for a period of time. But if Roaring Kitty is the mystery buyer, which it's pretty obvious that he is, at some point he is going to tweet about this position because he wants to make $1 billion. Last year with GameStop, this move that came out from the $10 range, he later revealed that he had $100 million in GameStop shares and $65 million in out-the-money call options, and the stock went from $10 all the way to $65. On this first candle, AMC announced that they were diluting shareholders because AMC moved with GameStop. GameStop also sold on the news, and then it started to run again, and this was like when Roaring Kitty was not backing down. He kept posting like different memes showing that he was in the actual position, and the stock actually ended up running again. And once it ran the second time, then Ryan Cohen, the CEO of GameStop, put out that he was diluting shareholders, and then that killed the stock. And then later it was revealed that Roaring Kitty both left GameStop, and then he also like tried playing Chewy, which was the originally founded company by Ryan Cohen. So there was like a weird obsession with GameStop and Ryan Cohen, and Roaring Kitty tried playing both of those. But during this whole run, he actually wicked $1 billion. This was his highest position that he actually posted on the day. It closed at $586 million. But at one point on this first run, during this day, when it was up here around $64, that position was over $1 billion. So what does that mean? Well, it means that Roaring Kitty wants to make $1 billion, and he posted that all these memes like "you were a billionaire," and it's like he's looking in the mirror crying meme. So it's pretty obvious that what his goals are, right? So in order for him to make $1 billion, say, let's just take an example. Right now, Unity Software is trading at $26. Okay, we can assume that Roaring Kitty has already bought, we'll say, $100 million of Unity around like $20 per share, we'll say, is his cost basis. Well, in order for him to make $100 million, the price has to double, right? So Unity has to go from $20 to $40, and he would net plus $100 million, right? 100 million would 2x, and he'd make $100 million. Well, that's not going to get him to $1 billion. And so what he's doing is he's buying out the money call options on various expirations, mostly June, December, and January, I believe. And he's buying really large blocks of them, right? So say he puts in $65 million into options. Well, this can maybe 4 or even 5x, right? So if 5x's, that turns into $325 million. So on that money, he makes $260 million, right? So he's not quite at $1 billion yet there either. So this has to really explode to the upside, right? Well, when he actually starts selling his position, all the options dealers who hedge against his position will have to be selling the shares that are hedged against those options. Plus, when he starts selling these large 10K, 20K blocks of options, it's going to show up on the flow. And so people are going to know when he's actually selling out of his position. And when he's selling out of his position, not only is it going to move the stock price lower, but then people are going to start piling onto that and selling out of their positions as well. So really, the only way for him to get to $1 billion is for the stock price to go crazy, right? We need the stock to not just double, maybe even triple, for him to actually be able to get to $1 billion, right? So, I mean, if we're looking at this, we could chart a few different levels here. right? So you can see there's like a level here, there's a level here. So that's like $43 to $51, but there's also, only like levels here at 31 and even maybe 35 where it's rejected in the past. So these are all important, obviously, and maybe in some level of the structure, the stock price will reject at one of these levels, right? Like maybe 58, 59, if it really starts getting squeezed to the upside. Obviously, it's traded at really high levels before, and it's possible with enough people buying options, shares, it could cause a gamma ramp where option dealers are required to hedge against the position, and you could see a really strong move to the upside. Now, at some point, Unity Software is going to dilute shareholders, right? Just like they did with GameStop and AMC. But Unity is not really a meme stock, right? It's not quite an AMC or a Nokia, a BlackBerry, a GameStop. They're not going to be as quick, at least I assume they're not going to be as quick to actually dilute shareholders, because this is like run-of-the-mill thing for GameStop and AMC. The stock price runs, they dilute. The stock price runs, they dilute. Like, they have their finger on the trigger. They can talk to their lawyers and their advisors and just put out a filing right away that they're diluting shareholders. Unity might not be as quick to the punch to do so, and so that allows for a bit more breathing room for the price to push higher if this gets picked up by social media, mainstream, and even like the GameStop apes. Maybe they start FOMOing from GameStop and buying Unity once Roaring Kitty shows his position. So there's a lot of things that could play out. Usually once he does tweet, the stock will run, we'll say like 100 to 112%. And then usually it's like at least a day or two, right? So like worst case scenario in my positions, once he tweets, the stock will like maybe try to go up 100%, 50%, something like that. And to really understand how options create leverage on the underlying share price, I want to give you guys an example looking at the options chain. We can look at it for both June and for January. So the 30 call right now, which is out the money to break even, it's about a 20% move on the underlying stock. The delta right here that you're seeing is about 0.31. And that's a quick way of looking at, well, when I buy this contract for $1.13 or $113, which is the right to buy, not the obligation, but the right to buy 100 shares of the underlying at 30, the options dealer will hedge against that position to remain delta neutral. And really, they just don't want to take on unnecessary risk. If the stock price goes up, then they hedge by buying the underlying share price. So they would buy roughly 31 shares per contract when you buy a June 30 call. And so that's leverage, right? So if we're looking at this, a June 20, 30 call, it's at $1.13. The delta is at 0.31. It's the right to buy 100 shares. And so 100 shares times that is 31 shares. The current stock price of Unity is 26. And so you're paying this times 100, right, for the contract. So you're paying $113, and the options dealer is buying $808 of Unity software stock. Now, as price goes higher, the options dealer will continue to buy more and more shares until at expiration, if it's trading over 30, they would own 100 shares of the underlying, right? So it's possible that 100 shares times, this would be, say, if we were just looking at this in a vacuum, if somehow Unity was over $30, then, this is roughly like 2,600. It'd be a bit more, right? Because they'd be buying as the price goes higher. But if they hedged it right at the time of you purchasing the contract, you can see that this would be $2,608. That divided by your original payment for the contract is 23 times, excuse me. So you're creating 23 times leverage on a contract that's out the money, that expires in 20 days. So you can see how this gets kind of crazy if there's a lot on the options chain that people are holding out the money call options and price continues to go higher. Option dealers are forced to buy shares of the underlying. And then of course you can also look at like the January expiration and do a similar math, right? So here the delta is a bit higher because it's further out the money, so they hedge a bit more on today. But you can see how much volume there was. There's 31,000 volume and there's 62,500 open interest. And so as price continues higher, they're currently hedging about 55 shares at $26. 55 at $26. So they're hedging $1,438 versus the $520 that you paid originally. And then of course, if this was maxed out at 100 shares, it's $2,600 as well. And you're getting about a 5 times leverage on the further strikes that are the further expiration dated contracts. So you're getting more leverage up front if price really moves quickly, but you're seeing a little bit less leverage if you're buying the leaps or the longer dated call options. But nonetheless, this is way more leverage than just buying outright shares of the underlying, which are a 1.0 delta, right? You buy one share, that's it. One delta, you buy a share. So you can see how this gets crazy if the price really starts moving a lot, but that would mean that we would need to see some really strong upward movement on Unity with enough options volume and liquidity for Roaring Kitty to actually sell into that position. And that means we're going to have to push a lot higher on the stock price for him to hit that $1 billion goal that I'm sure that he's looking for. But nonetheless, Unity really is a valued long-term company. Like last year, they became free cash flow positive. They've been improving their earnings, their margins. Revenue's kind of flat, but hopefully this vector platform can see a lot of uplift in that. And you see that it's 11 billion market cap, where AAPL, which is what they're competing with their new vector platform, is at 133 billion. So it's certainly possible that Roaring Kitty's looking at this to just actually hold for the long term. Maybe he'll exercise and just keep buying more and more shares of the company. We'll see how this really all unfolds. If he can make enough money on the June dated contracts, then it's certainly he could just continue to buy shares of the underlying, and maybe there won't be that big of a sell on the stock. So we'll see how things go. It just got to upgrade. There's a lot going on here. We'll see if we can breach over 10K in the challenge account this week. Make sure you guys hit the like, subscribe, join the Discord if you haven't. It's completely free. I'm not selling anything. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace.